Welcome to Pagan Coffee Talk. Here are your hosts, Oswin and Lord Knight. Today's topic is, we're going to call it need versus want, but this is more of a response to a live stream on YouTube that we had seen. They were talking about how they always do spell work first.
Right.
This is kind of a response to that.
Right. And nothing wrong with what they said. It's just my take on what they said, what they were talking about.
Right.
I mean, because in our tradition, we would sit there and tell you casting a spell's the last option, not the first.
Right. We don't turn to spell work unless there's just no other option.
Right. I mean, it's literally the last option we do to do things. And the reason being is the way we do spells.
Right.
All right, because there comes a time in our meditation and stuff where we've gone through all our issues and stuff like that, and we're just sort of sitting there hanging out in our heads.
Right.
Going over all faults and ideas and concepts and stuff like this over and over again. But one of the things that we do is, we will actually start to do is, we will start making symbols for ourselves to represent feelings. So whatever symbol you need for you to represent love. And then that would also be a question of what kind of love. So like if you just wanted puppy love, you would just do that you would just re-experience in your meditations all the times you fell into puppy love.
Right. I would just pick a symbol, it could be a leaf for all I know.
Right.
And then I would just focus on that emotion
while looking at this symbol or keeping this symbol in mind, so you automatically have that feeling when you see that symbol.
Right.
So that way, when you're doing a spell, what you will do is you'll actually draw the symbol that represents the feelings that you're trying to use, and sort of set that off to the side. So when it gets to that part, you can look at it and actually feel those pure emotions.
Right.
And hence, this is one of the reasons why in the world we use it as a last resort, because that's very emotionally and mentally taxing.
It is, yeah.
All right. I mean, it can cause you to have certain episodes. So in other words, if you were doing something that required energy that's more depressing, yes, this could actually cause you to go into depression too, because you've surrounded yourself with that energy.
Right.
For a long amount of time. So, I mean, again, to us, this is the nuclear option. Because, again, we believe that the purer the emotion, the better the spell. The more intense and better it is. So you won't, when you're have that healing feeling, it's literally all-encompassing.
Right.
It literally overwhelms you. I don't know how to explain that. But it's very emotional and to go through. So, yeah, to me, this is like setting off a nuclear bomb in the middle of something.
So now, but that brings up the whole thing. If you're going to do this, you need to know if it's truly a need.
Right.
Or if it's just something you want.
Well, we need to discuss the difference between a need and a want. A want, to me, that feeling for a want is very fleeting. Because a want is something you want it. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have it.
Right.
All right. When we talk about needs, we're talking about food, shelter, clothing, protection, and those actual. And I don't know how you explain that. Need.
And sometimes protection.
Yeah.
Is a want.
Is a want. Yes.
Because I've seen a lot of people. Well, I need this spell for protection. I need this spell for protection. But when they talk about what it is they're doing, it's like, okay, do you really need that?
Well, again, this is the difference between, okay, I can protect myself just by locking my doors and paying attention and blah, 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 or do I hire a security guard?
Right.
Those who want to cast spells like what you're talking about for protection, this is them trying to hire a security guard. You're just going way over for something that don't need to be that way over.
Right, but again, it comes down to you need versus want. So again, back to definitions.
Right. If anybody has done any fasting before, you understand the want or the need to eat something, where it becomes more of a need than an actual want.
Right.
I mean, I could sit here all day and do the same thing, get the munchies and just grab trail mix or whatever as I go along the day. I
Right.
never actually get to a point to where it's a necessary thing.
Right.
You know, and I think a lot of people in the United States, we have this problem in this country.
I think so, yeah.
All right, because everybody wants to do the wants and don't actually understand what a need is, because needs in this country, I'm sorry, we have fat homeless people.
Right?
How do you get fat homeless people unless you're just some rich country that just are able to throw that much food out to where, I'm sorry, you go over to other poor countries and stuff like that, their people are starving.
Yeah.
So I think it is a good thing for people of craft to take time to do those fasting. Don't get me wrong, properly, healthy, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
All right. I don't need somebody to starve themselves to death. But do it for a while. Talk to your doctor about it beforehand. Try it. See what happens. You know, of course, you can't quit drinking because you'll die, but you can go a couple of days without food.
Right.
Easily. To give you that sense of need versus want. I'm trying to think of ways to help people get to the point of understanding what a need is versus a want. Because until you experience it, it's hard to explain.
It is hard to explain, but there are certain dynamics
Right.
of a need versus the dynamics of a want.
Right. I mean, and there's a difference between sitting there going, okay, I need to get this certification to keep my job,
Right.
versus this nebulous need of hunger or sleep or something like that.
Right.
Where it's a little harder to define. You know, somebody going back going, you know, I need to sit down and rest for a little bit. Not too many young people understand that. Some of us older people understand it too well.
Well, I mean, if it helps, you know, we can look at the dictionary for a definition, and need is defined as necessary.
Yeah, the emotion behind a need is a hell of a lot more powerful than the actual emotions behind a want.
Right.
All right. I mean, majority of the times wants and stuff are more selfish feelings than I need to feed my family.
Right.
Doing that, hey, yeah, I'll go out and rob a store to feed my family, but I'm not going to go out and rob a store just because I need a new car.
Right. I think the need has a sense of urgency to it
Yes.
that a want doesn't.
Right. It goes beyond the feeling of desire, of a want.
Right.
This gets down into survival.
Exactly, yeah.
And yes, with those more survival needs and stuff like that, I believe because those emotions are harder, more hardwired into us, that those magics that comes from this is a whole lot more powerful versus, oh, yeah, I just want a new job because I don't like my old one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I hate to be this way. You don't necessarily need to spell to find another job. You just need to put in applications.
Right.
If you happen to get it graded, it's not like your old job is, you're being abused or something. So I don't know how to explain that and get to people or suggestions on how people could get to a need versus a want.
I think a need just, it happens. You find yourself in a situation where you have that sense of urgency. You have that emergency situation.
Right.
So like with food, you may have been short on cash for 3 or 4 days and had very little to eat over the course of those days.
Right.
And then you run out of cash and then you can't get any food.
Right. And then it becomes, as days progress from that point.
From that point on, it becomes your body needs that nourishment and your body tells you that.
Well, I mean, I've heard of people that have been like out at sea somehow, you know what I mean, on a raft or something. And they talk about how in the world they started to eat parts of fish that they normally wouldn't eat because their body was craving the nutrients in that part.
Right.
Because I remember a guy talking about how they would eat fish, but they wouldn't like eat the eyes. Then suddenly they started to because there was a craving there.
Right.
That overrides your normal sense of what you would and would not do.
Right. Well, and see, that type of craving is different from you're sitting at home, you've had dinner, you're watching TV, and you're like, ah, damn.
You know, a little bit of chocolate cake would be about nice
Right.
now, or a cookie, or
Or some ice cream or something.
Is completely different.
That's different than this type of situation where you're out at sea on a freaking raft.
I mean,
for
don't get me
5
wrong.
days.
I'm not going to sit there and tell somebody, okay, yeah, to understand needs, you got to get onto a raft and go out there for 5 days and almost kill yourself.
Oh no! I mean, we're just trying to.
Well, I mean, and again, this same need that we're talking about arises like the guys in the airplane up in the Andes, and they wound up having to eat
Right.
some of the people that didn't survive
Right.
to survive themselves.
That's a need.
That's a need. It even overread their normal ethics or morals to
Right.
get them to do this. But once it comes back to normal, that ethic and moral will kick back in.
Yes.
That amazes me that, a need, something that would require you to actually override behavior you wouldn't normally do.
Sometimes it is that way, though.
Again, like I said, or what is that? The Dharma party, where they wound up doing that. They had to do the same thing.
Yeah.
They were trapped out there, nothing to eat. So, Fred's dead, so he don't need that buck cheek.
Right. We could just cook that up, and
Yeah. Who would know the difference?
there's some good muscle there. That'll be good eating.
I mean, this is a need. I mean, a spell powered by this type of need, to me, again, would seem a whole lot more powerful.
Well, yeah, because again, we're back to it's a raw emotion.
Right. It's
And
a
the
primal.
rawer-
We're talking about primal emotions and energies here.
Right. And the truer it is,
The better.
the more powerful it is.
Right. So again, casting a spell to me, coming out and being the first option, not necessarily if I'm going to have to put myself in this type of state.
Right.
Again, this is mentally, emotionally, and spiritually draining.
But I think that's also why a lot of the old spells and old magic work and workings required like some type of body fluid, because that's the essence of that person.
I could see what you're saying, where they're using this to be the essence of that desire,
Right.
of this need of, I have to have this.
And I think that's where that comes from. I could be wrong, but I think that's where that comes from.
And you don't test your mantle until you're out in the woods trying to do one of them survival things.
Right.
That you've paid some up to go out and learn how to survive. When you're actually in that, you start to understand what that need is, what that feeling is,
Right.
a whole lot better. Again, I'd suggest anybody to try to do this, to learn these things, but do it in a safe way.
Right. Don't just go out and do it on your own and risk life and limb.
and hurt yourself. Again, these things are pushing that envelope to understand what these emotions are like. Once you
Right.
do understand them, recalling them becomes easier, because you can actually sort of put yourself back into that mindset,
Right.
even without being hungry or in danger.
Right. Ready for the next topic?
Sure.
So let's talk about the Celts.
Okay.
Let's delve into a little bit of what Celtic life was, social order, that type thing, and
Okay.
how it relates to what we do at Life Temple.
All right. This by no means is everything, or, all of it, or
No, and we are not the definitive
The
source
source.
on all of this information. This information's been handed down to us. So
It's what Lord Man taught. It's what I teach, and the whole 9 yards.
Right. So take it for what it's
worth.
What it's worth.
I mean, well, first of all, you got to remember, Celtic society was set up in like a class system.
Right.
Okay. So you had the king class,
Right.
the warrior class, the Azadonas,
Right.
and then you had common folks, and then
Right.
the additional of some slaves here and there.
Right.
Now, again, this kind of slavery was whoever was in the tribe that you just beat the crap out of.
Right.
Across the way. This isn't, 2,000 leagues somewhere else. All right. These were your next door neighbors, slavery.
Exactly.
All right. I mean, I hate to be that way. Those who dominated did. So we have these different classes. So I guess we need to start with kings. All right. Kings in Celtic society were non-hereditary. Just because you were a king and you had a son does not automatically mean your son will become king.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right. Your son could just grow up to be a complete idiot and nobody likes, and the guy down the road's got better common sense to lead the tribe.
Right.
He could literally come up to you and challenge you to a duel or something like that and take your kingship. So changing into different classes in Celtic society was possible, unlike there was in more of the rigid class type things. So like a common person could become a warrior.
Right.
And so forth and so on. It was easy to do.
Yeah, it wasn't quite like it was in like the days of King Arthur.
Right.
Where to be a knight,
or the way we think
you had to come from that family of knights.
Right.
You had to have some of that royalty in you in order to be a knight.
Right. I mean, in this case, just to be a king of your tribe, it was just, your chieftain. It was the best warrior. It was who could protect the
right
area the best.
Right. You were the best of the best.
Right. And that was it. Now, to be a king or something like that, you have to marry the priestess.
Right.
All right. There's a reason for this, because Celtic men used to pay what we called a bride price to all the women to get them to marry them.
Right.
And you could stay married for 1 year. If there was a child, you stayed married till the child was raised and you had more kids. If you didn't have kids, you could go your separate ways and try to find a better match.
Right.
If you wanted to. If you wanted to stay, you could. All right. But you paid the bride price. So to get somebody to marry you, hey, I'm going to have to give you a quarter of my land and 3 pigs.
Right.
Even on separation, even if we separate, they got to keep that price. So a lot of women wound up owning a lot of the land and a lot of the livestock. And we're actually very rich, powerful people in the community.
Right.
All right. Because again, to own land in Celtic society, one must be able to defend it. Either A, themselves, or be able to hire people to guard it for you.
Right, because that's essentially how land ownership was. It wasn't, that's your land. And I purchased this, so I get to keep it.
Right. I didn't pay such and such. No, I gave blood and tears to protect this land and make sure nobody else took it from me.
Right, because that's the way it was. Somebody could literally attack you.
And just take your land.
And just take your land from you.
Because you'd be dead.
Right.
Or a slave. That was life back then.
Right.
No excuses or anything like that. So everybody in Celtic society were taught to fight as kids. And matter of fact, most of the women were the ones that taught all the guys to fight.
Right.
Because the guys were off doing war and hunting and all this other stuff. Because again, if you're part of the warrior class in Celtic society, it's feast, drink, make war, have a little bit of fun in between, and that's your day in, day out.
Right.
Now, then you had like the Azadonas. All right. These were the gifted ones. In this category, you had blacksmiths, healers,
jewelry makers,
blacksmiths, stonemasons, druids, and bards. Now, bards in Celtic society, if you killed one, came with an honor price that you had to pay. They were the only ones that were allowed to freely travel amongst all the tribes and clans without any problems, mainly because that's how information got moved around.
Right.
They were the newscasters, I guess, bringing stories. Hence the reason why in the world, most warriors' best friend was a bard, because they hoped, hey, you'll write a story about me or sing a song, and maybe the other tribe might want me to come over there and be their king.
Right.
I mean, stuff like this happened. So this seems pretty easy. Now, don't get me wrong. Most of the druids were actually farmers or lawyers or something else besides just being. Now, druids were often the ones that had the powers behind the kings, because druids had the ability to do what was called banishing people.
Right.
And a lot of people don't understand. Normally, when you talk about banishing, they think, okay, you're gone forever. Bye. Banishment could be, yes, you were just kicked out of the tribe for 3 months. If you survived and came back, that was your punishment.
Right.
Because you learned how hard it is to survive on your own. And then that makes you a better person when you come back. Now, if you've done something to be banished permanently, you've done some bad shit.
Yeah.
You know, but this is what the power the druids had behind everything. They could even banish kings. There's this wonderful movie called Warrior Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about Boudica. And if you get a chance, y'all need to watch this. This is a really good, to sort of show how Celtic life really was.
Yeah, it's an old, well, I won't say it's old, but I believe it's like 2013 or something like that.
Yeah, the woman that plays Dr. Riversong on Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And ER, she's the star. She's the main. She plays Boudica in this. And
right.
She does a wonderful job.
Right. This was put on by Masterpiece Theater.
Yeah. It was an interesting take. I liked it. But I mean, that would give you a better idea of what Celtic life was like.
Right.
Like I said, women held most of the same status as men. Now, especially when we're talking about kings, we have the whole concept of the goddess of sovereignty. The high priestess bestows upon him the right to rule over her lands for her. And in doing so, there was a ritual done, and there was a belief that the health of the king was directly related to the land. So if it was believed if the land was sick, the king would be sick. If the king was sick, hence the reason the land would be sick. Hence the reason why in the world we get the story of King Arthur with the Holy Grail, because that's where this concept comes into, because he's injured, which injures the land. In turn, so to heal the land, they have to heal the king. So they go on the quest for the Holy Grail.
Right.
You know, this is the same concept that we see in Celtic society. You know, I kind of find it a little wild, but... What other parts of Celtic society am I forgetting?
The common folk.
Oh, the common folk.
The farmers, the herders.
Yeah, you had farmers and herders, and most of them had like maybe a quarter of an acre of land to 2 acres of land to farm on. And if you were part of a tribe and you had a chieftain, you would probably give the chieftain part of your food. And it's his job to make sure everything runs right and handle any of the internal problems. So that's what he's getting paid for.
Right.
Technically. You could get someone to tutor your kid. So you might give a blacksmith part of your food and your kid will become an apprentice.
Right.
So they can learn blacksmithing or this job or that job to try to up the status of your family from common folk to that more upper class type thing. And if families or tribes were actually warring, sometimes they would actually even switch kids. So they wouldn't fight each other thinking, okay, they won't attack me because their son's fighting on my side.
Right.
They don't want to hurt their son. And vice versa on the other side, which ended a lot of the feuding and stuff like that. I didn't say it made them friends or anything, but...
No, but it did stop the fighting.
Yeah. But I mean, but this is also where we get these marriages of convenience or arrangement is to make peace. Not, You know, you're looking out for the interests of your people, not the interests of you.
Right.
So, go figure.
It's a solution.
It's a solution.
And it worked.
I mean, this is just what Celtic life was like. I mean, hence the reason why, you know, most pagans I know don't have a problem with the Second Amendment and think everybody should learn hand-to-hand combat.
Right.
And stuff like this is because it is part of our culture. It's part of what we do. You know, I think it makes you less of a target, you know.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, I still think there's some of these concepts that we could use nowadays.
So how does all of that relate to, like, how we operate within our coven?
Well, basically, our temples are all set up the same way. Just like the individual tribes were self-governed, temples are self-governed.
Okay.
They might be part of the organization and realize that they have to stay within certain confines, but other than that, it's their deal. While this makes it more, spreads out power and authority and stuff like that, and makes it easier to deal with things on a local level.
Mm-hmm.
It also has a bad thing because it also means that, you know, just like in Celtic society, doesn't necessarily mean that the tribe next to you is going to come to your aid when you need it.
Right.
You know, there's a downside to this too.
Well, I mean, nothing's guaranteed.
Nothing's guaranteed, but I mean, most temples, this is how they're ran. You know, one will hive off and go start another temple somewhere else. They start to self-govern, and they're no longer under the auspices of that high priest and priestess.
Right.
You know, tribes, I can see tribes doing the same thing. They get too big for an area and maybe have to break off, and part of them go somewhere else, or there's a little bit too much conflict in there. We could take the people that were conflicting that want to live this way versus this way and separate them, but still be part of the same group at the same time.
Okay.
So that might have just confused everybody.
I don't know. It made sense to me.
You know, I mean, and the way they have their class system is basically the same way we set up our degree system. You know, again, it is a degree system, it is a class system, but it's not a hard class system. You can go from one to another.
Right.
Like, you know, you got your first degrees. We're about like being a common folk. So, I mean, they do a lot of the work around the temple, set up altars and take them down and clean that stuff and help try to take care of that. Then you got the second degrees who are more like the Azadonas, where you're learning a specialty. No matter what in the world it is, you're learning a specialty. Then you got your warrior class, which is more like your third degrees. Because they're the ones that are required to stand between the temple and the outside world. So if there's like a court case or something, it's a third degree going to be on the stand. If there's a camera pointed at them, it's going to be a third degree there. It's not going to be some first degree off somewhere else. Your anonymity, we try to protect that at all cost.
So where does the king and the goddess of sovereignty fall into all of this?
They're more associated with that elder status.
Okay.
Again, that we're ruling from wisdom and experience. They're not telling you exactly how to do it. They're just guiding you.
Okay.
It's that wisdom and knowledge that these elders have, that when they sit down with you and they tell you stuff. You know, I'm not telling you not to plant your corn there, but I'm just saying you had it there last year. You might want to move it to the other side. I could be wrong.
Right.
You know, I can see kings doing that. You know, I really don't want to upset the farmer, but yeah, I see we're getting diminished returns because he's not rotating his crops.
Right.
Which he might not see because he's down there. And making that slight suggestion or stuff like that might help.
Just maybe. Thanks for listening. Join us next week for another episode. Pagan Coffee Talk is brought to you by Life Temple and Seminary. Please visit us at lifetempleseminary.org for more information, as well as links to our social media: Facebook, Discord, Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit.
We travel down this trodden path, a maze of stone and mire. Just hold my hand as we pass by a sea of blazing pyres. And so it is the end of our days, so walk with me till morning breaks. And so it is the end of our days, so walk with me till morning